All right, Part 376, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Part 376.2, Part 376, Lease and Interchange Vehicles. Subpart A, General Applicability Definitions. 1, Applicability 2 Definitions. Subpart B, Leasing Regulations. 11, General Leasing Requirements. 12, Written Lease Requirements. Subpart C, Exemption and Leasing Regulations. 376.21, General Exemptions. 376.22, Exemption Private Carrier Leasing between authorized carriers. 372.26, Exemption Leases between authorized carriers and their agents. Subpart D, Interchange Regulation. 376.31, Interchange Equipment. Subpart E, Private Carriers and Shippers. 376.42, Issue Lease Equipment Regulated with the Carriers. All right, subpart 8, general applicability and definition. 376.1, applicability of the regulations of the part with apply with the following action: motor carrier with the restricted register with the Secretary of the Transport Property with the Title 49 U.S. Standard Code Subtitle 4, Part B, leasing of the equipment with the perform and transportation regulation by the Secretary. The leasing of the equipment of the motor vehicle carrier, shipping the interchange of the equipment between the higher motor carriers and the performance transportation regulations by the Secretary. 372.6, definition. Authorized carrier, person over the person authorized to engage the transportation property of the motor carrier under the provisions of Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 13901 and 902. The equipment, the motor vehicle of the straight truck, of the tractor trailer, semi-trailer, full trailer, any combination of any of the type of equipment of the authorized carrier for the transportation of the property of the hire, interchange of the receiver, the equipment of one motor carrier property from any of their such carrier at the point from which both carriers are authorized to serve the which from the continuum throughout the movement. Owner, any person for the title of the equipment issue with the two listed who are without the title of the right of the exclusive use of the equipment. 3, who has the lawful possession of equipment, the register with the license in any state with the name of the person. Lease and a contract agreement with the owners of the use of the equipment without the driver specified period of the carrier of the use of the regulated transportation of the property exchange with the compensation. The lesser. Is in the lease of the property granting the use of the equipment with and without the driver to another. The leaser is the party of the acquiring the use of the equipment without the driver for another. Sublease written contract with the lease of the lesser of the grant on the use of the liquid leased equipment with or without the driver to another. Addendum: the sublimit of the existing lease will not affect until the sign of the leaser or lesser private carrier person other than a motor carrier transportation property motor vehicle interstate foreign commerce with one person with the owner leaser or bailey of the property with the transportation of the property with being transported for the release or rent of the bailment or further commercial enterprise. The shipper with the person intended to receive the property for the transported in the interstate foreign commerce. 1, L escrow fund the money deposited for the lesser either with a third party with the leaser of the granted for the performance of the repay advance for the cover of the repair expense of the handle claim with the handle license of the state permit costs for any other purposes mutually agreed upon by the leaser and lesser. Detention holding the co-signer or the co-signee with the trailer with or without power until the unit and driver beyond the free time allocated with the shipment or circumstances not attributed with the performance of the carrier. Subpart B, leasing regulations. 376.11, the general leasing requirements other than through the interchange of the equipment set forth in 376.381 under the exemption set forth in subpart C with the regulation, the authorized carrier with the bank perform authorized transportation and equipment if it does not allow own only under the following conditions. Lease of the lease shall be written with the lease granting of the use of the equipment immediately requirements with contained in 376.12. Receipts and equipment that reach specifically identified with equipment to be leased from the starting of the day with the time of the day of the possession transferred shall be given as follows. With the possession of the equipment to take of the authorized carrier with the shall be given the owner of the equipment a receipt. The receipt identified with the section shall be transmitted by mail, telegraph, or other similar means of the communication. When in possession of the equipment of the authorized carrier ends of the receipt shall be given in accordance with the terms of the lease agreement. A lease agreement requires that the receipt authorized representative of the carrier, the owner of the make of the possession, lease the equipment to give the receiver the receipt required under the subsection identification of the equipment of the authorized carrier acquiring use of the equipment under the section identified with the equipment being in service as follows during the time period of lease of the carrier identifying the equipment in accordance with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration requirements of the Title 49 CFR Part 390 of the chapter identification of the vehicles. Unless the copy of the lease of the carrier on the equipment, the authorized carrier to keep the shipment, keep the statement with the equipment during the period of the leasing of the certified the equipment is being operated by it, and statement that should also be specifying with the name of the owner and the date of length of the lease and any with the restriction of the lease of the relative of the commodity to be transported, the address in which the original lease is to be kept by the authorized carrier. The statement shall be prepared with the authorized carrier with the authorized representative of the record of the equipment. The authorized carrier with the equipment leased from the under the section shall be kept with the record of the equipment as follows. The authorized carrier shall prepare the keep documents covering each of the trip of the equipment used in its services. These documents shall contain the name and address of the owner of the equipment, the point of the origin, time and the date of the departure of the point of the final destination. Also, the authorized carrier shall have carried the papers of the lease equipment during the operation containing the information identifying the landing and the clearly indicating the transportation and using under responsibility. The papers shall be preserved. The authorized carrier of the part of the transportation record of the lease will contain information required of the provision of the paragraph that may be either retained instead of such documents of the paper as to the lease agreement negotiated under the master lease. A provision is compiled without or having a copy of the master lease, and the unit of the equipment in question with whether the balance documentation called with the paragraph is included with the freight documents prepared in the specific movement. 376, written lease requirements. Except the provided exemption set forth in subpart C with the part of the written lease requirement of 376.11a. Shall contain the following provision required of the lease provision shall be adhered to the performed and authorized carrier. Parties lease of it shall be made between the authorized carrier with the owner, and shipment of the lease shall be signed by these parties or by the authorized representative. The duration to be specific. The lease shall specify the time and the date of the circumstance of the lease if it begins at the end of the time of the circumstance shall coincide with the time of the giving the receipt required in 376.11b. Alright, exclusive possession responsibility 1. Lease shall be provided with the authorized carrier of the carrier of the leaser shall have the excessive possession, control of the use of the equipment, the duration of the lease. The lease shall see further provided authorized carrier of the leaser shall have the complete responsibility of the operation of the equipment over the duration of the lease. Provisions made by the lease of the coordinate considering authorized by the carrier of the leaser as the owner of the equipment over the purpose of the submit leasing and under the regulation of the authorized carrier during the lease. When authorized carrier of the household goods, lease equipment of the transportation household goods, the defined secondary of the parties must provide the lease of the provisions required in the paragraph C1 of the section applied during the time of the equipment is operated for the authorized carrier of the lease. Nothing in the provision required with the paragraph C1 of the section intended with the effect of the lesser or the deriver provided by the lease lesser of the independent contractor with the employee of the authorized carrier or the leaser independent contractor relationship between the exists of the carrier or leaser comply with the Title 49 U.S. Code 14102 tenant and administrative requirements. D. Compensation to be specified with the amount to be paid with the authorized carrier of the equipment. The driver's services shall be clearly stated on the face of the lease if an addendum which is attached to the lease such as the lease attached and such a lease the addendum shall be delivered to the lesser part of the commencement any with the trip of the instrument of the authorized carrier of the authorized representative of the lesser is made, except the documents of the amount to be paid by the express percentage of the gross of the revenue of the flat rate per mile variable the rate depending on the direction of the travel, the type of the commodity, the transport, or any other method of the compensation mutually agreed upon by parties to the lease. The compensation stated in the lease for the attached addendum may apply with equipment and driver services of the separately as a combined amount. The items specified in the lease surely clearly specify the part of the responsible to remove the identification device of the equipment upon the termination of the lease and when how the devices other than those painted directly on the equipment will be returned to the carrier of the lease to show clearly specify the manner in which the receipt will be given to the authorized carrier by equipment owner of the later it retakes the possession of the equipment upon the termination of the lease agreement. If the receipt is required to all the lease of the lease shall clearly specify the responsibility of each of the parties with respect to the cost of fuel taxes, empty mileage permits, all types of tolls, ferries, detention, accessory services, base place, license, any of the unused portions of the such item in the lease shall clearly specify the reasonable loading, unloading the property onto the motor vehicle and compensation into any be paid. The services, except when the violation of the result of the act of admission with the lesser, the authorized carrier of the leaser shall assume the risk of the cost of the binds for the overweight of the oversight of the trailer. When the trailer is preloaded with the seal of the load and containerized, when the trailer is loading, trailer or lading is otherwise outside of the lesser's control for the improperly permitted the overdimension overweight load shall be reimbursed of the lesser of the any funds paid by the lesser of the authorized carrier of the authorized to receive the refund with the credit of the base plate with the purchase by the lesser for issue with the name of the authorized carrier. If the base plate is authorized to be sold by the authorized carrier to another lesser, the authorized carrier shall refund the initial lessers on the behalf of the base of the plate with the first obtained the prorated share of the amount of the received. Payment period. The lease shall have specifically payment to the lesser payment to the leaser and shall be made within 15 days of each of the submission of the necessary delivery document with the other paperwork concerning the trip of the authorized of the carrier. Paper required before the leaser can receive the payment of the limitation of the logbook of the required for the Department of Transportation and the documents necessary for the authorized carrier with the insurer of the payment of the shipment in addition with the lease that provide for the upon termination of the lease agreement the condition proceeding in the statement of the leaser on the lesser The lessor shall remove all the identification marks of the authorized carrier, except in the case for the identification painted directly on the equipment. Return them to the carrier of the identification device and be made lost or stolen. Letter certifying the removal to satisfy the requirement until the requirement of the combine and compile with the carrier that withhold the final payment. The authorized carrier may require submission of additional documents to the lessor, but not to the prerequisite for the payment. The payment of the lessor shall not be made contingent upon submission of the bill of lading with no exemptions have been taken. The authorized carrier shall not set time limits for the submission by the lessor, required delivery documentation, and other paperwork. Alright, G, copies of freight bill and other freight documentation. When the lesser of the revenue is a percentage of the gross revenue of the shipment of the lease must specify the authorized carrier will give them the lesser before and the time of the statement with a copy of the rated freight bill with a computer-generated document containing with the same information, or in this case, the contractor of the annular documentation actual use the shipment containing with the same information that would appear on the rated freight bill. When the computer-generated document is to provide with the lease will permit the lesser to review during normal business hours. A copy of the actual document underlying the computer-generated document, generally, regardless of the method of the compensation on the lease, must permit the lessor to examine the copies of the carrier's tariff. In this case, the contract carrier, the other documents of which the rates and charges are computed, provide where the rates and charges are computed with the contract or the contract carrier to only those portions to the contract containing the same information that would appear with the rated freight with the bill needed to be disclosed. Authorized carrier made to leave the name of the shipper and consignors shown on the freight bill or other form of the documentation. Alright, chargeback items. The lease shall clearly specify all the items that may be initially paid with the authorized carrier, but ultimately deducted from the leaser's compensation at the time of the payment. Lessor's compensation at the time of the payment is settlement together with the recitation of how much amount of each of the item computed. The lessor shall be afforded a copy of the document in which is necessary to determine the validity of the charge. Products and equipment services of the authorized carrier of the lease of the specified lessor is not required to purchase the rent or any of the products, equipment, and services of the authorized the carrier condition entering into the lease agreement. The lease shall specifically specify the terms of any of the agreement into which the lessor is a party of the equipment purchase of the rental and contract would give the authorized carrier right to make the deductions of the lessor's compensation purchase of the rental payments. Insurance. The lease of the shall clearly specify the legal obligation authorized for the carrier to maintain or insurance covers the protection of the public pursuant to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration regulations, Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 13906. The lease shall further specify the responsibility providing other insurance coverage of operational lease equipment with the bobtail insurance if the authorized carrier will make the charge of the back to the lessor. For any of the insurance, the lease shall specify the amount which should be charged back to the lessor. If the lessor purchased the insurance covered the operation of the lease, the equipment of from the authorized carrier, the lease shall specify the authorized carrier will provide lessor with a copy of each of the policy requests. The lessor, and also with the lessor purchases the certificate of the insurance demand of the lease, shall specify the authorized carrier will provide the lessor with a certificate of the insurance and each of the policy. Each certificate insurance shall include the name of the insurer, policy number, and effective date of the policy amount, the types of the coverage, the cost of the lessor, each type of the coverage, and the deductible amount for each type of the coverage for which the lessor made it liable. The lease shall clearly specify the conditions under the deductions of the property damage may be to the lesser amount settlements, and the lease shall further specify the authorized carrier must provide the lessor with the written explanation and itemization deduction of the cargo property damage made from any of the compensation money owed to the lessor. Written with the explanation of the itemization must be delivered to the lessor before any of the deductions are made. K. Escrow funds. Escrow funds are required. Leases shall specify the amount of the escrow fund performance bond required to be paid by the lessor of the authorized carrier or to a third party. Specific items to which the escrow fund can be applied. 3. While the escrow fund is under the control of the authorized carrier shall provide account with the lessor with any transition involved such funds. The carrier shall perform the accounting of one of the following ways: by indicating the individual settlement, such as the amount of the description of any of the deduction addition may be to the escrow account; by providing separate accounting lessors of the transaction involving the escrow fund, and a separately accounting shall be done monthly on the basis. For the right of the lessor of the demand to have an account of the transaction involving the escrow fund at any time. While the escrow fund is under the control of the carrier shall pay the interest of the escrow fund at least quarterly basis for the purpose of the calculating the balance of the escrow fund on which the interest is paid, but the carrier shall may deduct for the sum equal to the average advance made to the individual lessor during the period of the time of the interest is paid. But the interest rate will be established for the day when the interest period begins shall be at least equal to the average yield equivalent coupon issue yield of 91 days 13-week Treasury bills as established in weekly auction by the Department of Treasury. Alright, 6. The condition of the lesser must fulfill the order of the escrow fund, return at the time of the return of the escrow fund with the authorized carrier of the may deduct the monies over the other obligation incurred with the lesser which have the previously specified with the lease to provide financial accounting with the lesser for such final deductions made with the escrow fund. The lease shall further specify that no event with the escrow fund be returned later than 45 days of the determination. Copies of the lease, original 2 copies of each lease shall be signed with the parties, and the authorized carrier shall keep the original and shall place the copy of the lease on the equipment during the period of lease unless the statement is provided with the 37611C2 is carried on the equipment. Instead, the owner of the equipment shall keep the other copy of the lease. The paragraph applied with the owners who are no agent or are not agents for the equipment that you, the agent with the authority with the carrier of the provider of the transportation on the behalf of the authorized carrier. In the situation, authorized carriers are obligated to ensure the owners receive all the rights and benefits due to the owner under lease regulations, especially those set forth in paragraph D and K. This is true regardless of whether the lease of the equipment is directly from the authorized carrier or the agent, rather than directly between the authorized carrier, each of these owners, and the lease between the authorized carrier and its agent shall specify the obligation. Alright, so Part C, Exemption of Leasing Regulations, 376, 21, General Exemption. Acceptance 376.11c, which require the identification of the equipment. The leasing regulation of the party shall not apply with equipment. You then substitute the motor rail transportation railroad freight moving between points of the railroad station and railroad building. Equipment used for the transportation performing exclusive to any of the commercial zone of the defined secretary. Equipment leased in without the drivers of the person who is principal and engaged in such business. Any type of the trailer not drawn with a power unit leased for the same lesser. 376.22, Exemption of private carrier leasing and a leasing between authorized carrier. Regardless of the leasing regulations set forth in this part, the authorized carrier may lease the equipment to and from another authorized carrier, but the private carrier may lease the equipment to an authorized carrier under the following conditions. The identification of the equipment requirements of the 376.11c must be complied with. The lessor must own the equipment and hold his own lease. Therefore, there must be written agreement that must be authorized carrier between the private carrier and authorized carrier. In the case B, concerning equipment as follows: it must be signed with the party with their authorized representative that must provide the control of the responsibility operation of equipment so that the leaser, and from time of possession of the take of the leaser of the receipt required within 376.11b is given to the lessor until the possession of the equipment is termed with the lessor and the receipt of the required 376.11b is received by the authorized carrier. 2. In the event of the agreement is between the authorized carriers and possession of the equipment is returned to the lessor given the another authorized carrier of the interchange of the equipment. 3. A copy of the agreement must be carried out with the equipment while it is in the possession of the leaser. Nothing in this section shall prohibit the authorized carrier of the private carrier's other entities conducting the leasing operation pursuant to this section master lease if in the copy of the master of the lease is carried in the equipment while the possession of the leaser if the master lease comply with the provision section and receipt with the exchange with accordance with 376.11b if the records or equipment are prepared with and maintained in accordance with 376.11d otherwise by private carriers under common ownership and control may lease to each other. Under this section will comply with the requirements of paragraph A of the section pertaining to the identification of the equipment. The requirement in paragraph C2 and C4 of the section pertaining to the equipment and receipt, leasing the equipment between the such carrier and the subject of the other requirement subject. Section 376.26 Exemption of lease between the authorized carriers and their agents. Lease regulations set forth in 376.12e1 and do not apply with the lease between authorized carriers and their agents. Alright, subpart D, interchange regulations. The interchange of the equipment. Authorized fire hire motor carriers may interchange equipment under the following condition. Interchange equipment agreement with the shell written contract lease or the other arrangement provided with the interchange of the specifically described in the equipment of the interchange written agreement shall necessarily be set forth in specific point of the interchange. However, the equipment is to be used with the common instantation for such use of the interchange agreement shall be signed with the party of the authorized representative. Operating authority of the carriers proceeding the interchange shall be registered with the secretary provided with the transportation of the commodity to the point where the physical exchange occurs. Through bills of landing, traffic transported and interchange services must be move on through bills of landing of the originating care of the rates charged with the revenues collected must accounted for in the same manner that has been no interchange. The charges of the use of the interchange equipment shall be kept separate from the division's joint rates of the portion of the such joint rates occurring with the court carriers and applicable local proportional rates. Identification of the equipment. Authorized hire motor carrier receiving equipment shall identify the equipment operated with the interchange of the service valves. The authorized hire motor carrier shall identify the power units according to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration requirements in Title 49 CFR 390. Identification of vehicles. Or given upon possession of the equipment, carrier shall remove all the identification showing the operating of the carrier unless a copy of the interchange agreement of the carrier carry the equipment. The authorized for hire motor carrier shall carry the statement of each of the vehicle during the interchange service, certifying that it is operating with the equipment. The statement shall also identify the equipment by the company with the state registration number. It shall also specify the point interchange, the date and time. Assume responsibility from the equipment, the use of the made with the equipment of the state over the shall be signed with the party for the interchange agreement for their authorized representative. The requirements of the paragraph shall not apply with the equipment that operated with an interchange service consistent only with the trailers and semi-trailers. 3 authorized carriers under the common ownership of the control interchange equipment with each of the other without complying with the requirements of paragraph D1 of the section pertaining to the removal of identifying the identification of the equipment. And E, connecting carriers consider their owner, the authorized carrier receiving the equipment in connection with it through the movement that consider this owner of equipment that with the purpose of leasing equipment, other authorized carriers and further into movement, the destination returning the equipment if the movement is completed. And then subpart E, private carriers and shipping. 376.42, lease with equipment regulation, regulated carriers. Authorized carriers may lease equipment and drivers from private carriers for periods less than 30 days in the manner set forth in 376.22. And that was part 376. 376, your lease and interchange vehicles.